Welcome, everyone. All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking the absolute biggest takeaways from the Town of Gray's Planning Board meeting, specifically the one from June 11th, 2026. If you've ever wanted to see how a town literally shapes its future, street by street, well, this is exactly where the rubber meets the road. So, the big overarching question we're exploring today is this. How exactly is the Town of Gray managing its newest wave of residential growth? During this particular meeting, the board had to tackle two very different multi-year development projects. And they were doing all of this while a brand new, highly anticipated town growth ordinance was looming right around the corner. It's honestly a fascinating look at the classic friction between rapid expansion and rural preservation. Here is how we're breaking things down today. First, we'll cover some quick town updates. Second, the Durgin Woods subdivision, followed by its impacts. Fourth, the Shaker Road duplexes, followed by their impacts. And finally, we'll tackle that looming growth ordinance. All right, let's get into it. Starting us off with Section 1, Town Updates, just covering a bit of admin and recent elections.
So, before getting into the heavy development plans, the board just had to handle a few quick administrative housekeeping items. The May 21st minutes were approved, just a minor correction there. We also got a heads up that board members ZA and Melinda have terms expiring in August, so they're going to need to re-up pretty soon. Also, the June 9th election results came in, and David officially retained his board seat, which is great, meaning the planning board gets to keep its full roster intact. And lastly, a brand new town council is getting sworn in on June 16th, bringing a new council and, of course, a new budget to the table.
Moving right along to Section 2, the Durgin Woods subdivision. This is a major phased project. 52. Just think about that number for a second. That is how many lots are being proposed for this massive, phased subdivision out off Ramsdale Road. The developer is essentially looking to take about 144 acres of largely undeveloped, old-growth rural land and just completely transform it into a sprawling neighborhood over the next several years. It is a huge undertaking. But nature really has a way of dictating design, doesn't it? The developers had originally planned this nice roadway loop, but then they discovered a significant vernal pool on the property. If you're not familiar, that's a temporary seasonal wetland that is absolutely crucial for local wildlife. Well, state and Army Corps rules mandate a really strict 75-foot setback from any wetland associated with one of those pools. Because this rule so severely crunched their developable window, the cost-benefit just went out the window. They literally had to scrap that loop completely from the plans. Which brings us to Section 3, Durgin Wood Impacts. We're going to look specifically at traffic, trails, and road connections here. The reality here is that you simply can't drop 50-plus homes into a rural spot without causing some serious growing pains. The board was super concerned about the intersection of Ramsdale Road and Route 202. Honestly, it's already kind of a nightmare with 0 new houses. It sits on a curve, it's really narrow, and cars constantly have to swerve around people waiting to make left-hand turns. Pumping 50 homes worth of daily commuters into that, it could be disastrous without some major infrastructure upgrades early on. But you know what the biggest talking point was? A town-mandated interconnected road. The town ordinance basically says new subdivisions shouldn't just be massive dead ends. So the developers proposed a 2,300-foot connection from their brand new road straight into Tamarack Lane, which is an existing quiet town road. Now, the board knows for a fact this connection is going to be controversial. One board member was incredibly candid with the developers, warning them, you might want to get ahead of that and talk to them. It could cause you a ruckus. And right? Imagine living on a quiet, dead-end street your whole life, and suddenly, bam, it's a throughway for a 52-home subdivision. The board strongly advised the developer to start sending out informational letters to those neighbors right away, rather than letting them get totally blinded at the public hearing. It wasn't all friction, though. A really cool positive for the community is that the developer agreed to bump up the central open space from 55,000 up to 60,000 square feet just to fully meet the town's park ordinance. And even better, they are keeping the existing super popular ATV and snowmobile trails completely open to the public. These trails link up to other green spaces in town, so it preserves a really vital piece of Gray's recreational character. Oh, and they even decided against lighting the park, which is awesome for keeping light pollution down. Okay. Let's shift gears completely and look at Section 4, the Shaker Road duplexes, a high-end rental project. This comparison right here perfectly captures the wild extremes of residential development the board is juggling. On one side of town, you have Durgin Wood, 50-plus single-family lots sprawling across 144 acres. On the flip side, the Shaker Road proposal is just 7 or 8 high-end rental duplexes tucked into a 23-acre parcel.
And the really important distinction here is that this entire Shaker Road project will stay under a single owner. So it goes through the approval process as a subdivision, but it's really going to operate more like a unified high-end rental community.
So what kind of challenges pop up for a smaller project like that? Let's check out Section 5, Shaker Road Impacts. We're talking water, waivers, and sightlines. The Shaker Road project is dealing with this incredibly specific, hyper-local puzzle. The developer is trying to line up their new subdivision road directly across from a neighbor's existing driveway on Route 26. Now, on one hand, they already have great sightlines, like 685 feet looking north. But they could get even better visibility if they shifted the road maybe 30 or 40 feet. But here's the catch. If they shift it, the new road won't align with that neighbor's steep driveway anymore, which creates this wonky, dangerous staggered intersection. And on top of that, they have to make sure that cars pulling out of the new neighborhood aren't blasting their headlights straight into the living room of that elevated house across the street. The board's ultimate advice? Go knock on the neighbor's door and literally just figure it out together.
Then we ran into some classic environmental bureaucracy. The developer essentially asked to skip a hydrogeological assessment. Just to clarify, that's a study that tracks how groundwater moves and checks if things like nitrite plumes from septic systems might contaminate the surrounding area. The developer was arguing, look, we're using public water, the soil is great, and the land naturally slopes down toward a local brook that would catch any potential nitrates long before they hit a neighbor's well. They felt like the test would cost thousands of dollars just to confirm what they already knew for sure. But planning boards? They are fiercely protective of their local environment. One board member didn't mince words, saying outright, I'll just tell you I'm leaning towards not granting a waiver. From their perspective, protecting that local brook is absolutely paramount. They really don't like waiving environmental studies unless someone brings incredibly hard, documented proof to the table. But then we got this fantastic bureaucratic plot twist. The town planner and code enforcement officer jumped in with a brilliant question. Is the ordinance even applicable in the first place? She pointed out that the only reason this assessment was even triggered is because this microscopic sliver of a sand and gravel aquifer barely touches the extreme far corner of their 23-acre property. It's nowhere near the actual construction site. She told the developer, instead of begging for a waiver, just submit a formal justification proving the ordinance legally doesn't even apply to this footprint. It is such a great example of how wildly nuanced local zoning can be. Finally, let's look at Section 6. This is the big, overarching theme that hovered over the entire meeting, the growth ordinance and its looming deadlines. The clock is literally ticking for developers in gray. Here we are on June 11th looking at early sketch plans for massive, multi-year projects. I mean, the Durgeonwood developer flat out said they plan to build maybe 10 to 15 houses a year. That means their project is going to take at least 5 years to finish. But squarely in the middle of that timeline is July 1st. That's when a brand new, town-wide growth ordinance takes effect, freshly passed by the town council. And to add to the pressure, sweeping new density laws tied to state legislation go into full enforcement by July 2027. So when a board member inevitably asked how this new growth ordinance would impact these current approvals, the answer was basically, well, it's a dynamic, open-ended situation completely up to the town council.
Which leaves us staring down this final, incredibly critical question. How will the July 1st Town Growth Ordinance actually impact these multi-year phased developments? If you are a developer holding a 5-year timeline or a resident who's stressed about rapid expansion, the rules of the game are quite literally changing mid-swing. Are these projects going to be grandfathered in? Will they get throttled back by the new council? It is a total cliffhanger for local governance. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer on the Gray Planning Board. Keep paying close attention to your local boards, folks, because this is exactly where the future of your community gets drawn up. Catch you next time.